Good afternoon and welcome to the Dollar Bank Inclusive Voices Lunch and Learn series. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Spradley, Head of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at Dollar Bank, and I'm excited that you've decided to spend this time with us today. National Census data has confirmed that Hispanic Americans make up the largest minority population in the United States. Even looking no further than the markets Dollar Bank currently serves, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and the Hampton Roads, Virginia area, local data supports incredible growth amongst the Hispanic community. For example, in Pittsburgh, the Hispanic population grew 170% 2010 to 2018. Lorain, Ohio, a town just outside of Cleveland, boasts the highest percentage of Hispanic and Latino residents in the entire state at 28.5%. And in Virginia, 1 in 10 Virginians identify as Hispanic. The advancement of the Hispanic community is vital to the growth of our regions on so many levels, yet many organizations continue to minimize the need to intentionally engage the Hispanic community. Today, our guests will share tips on how we can promote stronger engagement for a growing and thriving Hispanic community. My guests today are Melanie Marie Boyer, Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Metropolitan Area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Yvonne Ucero, Vice President of Select Practices at USI Insurance Services, a world leader in risk management, employee benefit, and retirement consulting. You can read their full bios at dollar.bank/Hispanic Heritage. Melanie and Yvonne, welcome to the Inclusive Voices conversation and happy Hispanic Heritage Month.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Oh my gosh, we're here. This is what we wait for all year. So we're definitely happy to be opening it with you.
Well, we are honored to have you here, and we have folks tuning in from all over. So there's a lot to get into, including a question that was given to me ahead of time, and I think I'm going to ask that question next. But I'd like to start kind of broad. Melanie, can you briefly describe what Hispanic Heritage Month means, and who does it include, and how is it celebrated?
So Hispanic Heritage Month, it started, I believe it was first enacted in 1988, I believe in August. It is a 30-day period, but us Latinos, we can't do 1 month. We needed two. So we're September 15th to October 15th. And this actually came about when Lyndon Johnson and Ronald Reagan were in office, and they saw the population growth. They had the projections. They knew, where the population was going in terms of not only growth, but, economic contributions, which is something that we're going to talk about soon. And just historically, all the contributions of Hispanics to American society. So we brought this about, and really it's a celebration of so many different cultures, because to be Hispanic or Latino, you can be from a number of countries, regions, etc. You can be first, second, third generation, as we know. So it really is a culmination of celebrations of a number of cultures, which we bulk into one, and we say is Hispanic heritage. Now, it's during this time of year because there are a lot of Independence Days of Hispanic countries that fall during this time. So that's why we chose those, half of each month. I always say it's 2 months. I celebrate for 2 months. I think you should too.
I love it. So it goes from September 15th to October 15th, and you had actually mentioned the words Hispanic and Latino as you were just explaining, and that was one of the questions that someone had asked earlier. They said, can you help me explain what the difference is between Hispanic Americans, Latino Americans, and this new term Latinx? Or it's not new anymore, but it was new to the person who asked the question. But I would love for you to kind of explain the difference between Hispanic Americans, Latino Americans, and what does Latinx mean?
Of course, I want to, preface this with saying that these views are my own. I do share them, but this is not an official statement of the chamber. So first of all, I want to start with Hispanic and Latino. There are not all, Hispanic or South American countries speak Spanish. They also speak Portuguese, speak French, but there are a lot of cultural similarities. So when we look at the different words, some people say, oh, this is only if you speak Spanish. This is only if you're from this region. Some people want to include Spain. Personally, I am including everyone, no matter which word I use, which is why if you ever hear me publicly speak, I try to use all three. in one paragraph, just to make sure everyone knows that they're included. And that brings me to the part which is kind of controversial, which is why I say that it's my own opinion, is Latinx. So, with any change that comes about, there is resistance. So there are a lot of people who do not believe that the term Latinx is appropriate. But I did a little bit of research into the term Hispanic, and it actually goes back to some pretty discriminatory roots that were very negative, which is a long story for another day. And that's the word that people choose to use the most. But when we come to the term Latinx, yes, it is an American created term. It is a new term. However, it includes everyone. It doesn't discriminate for sex, which is something that is very 2021, and we have resistance everywhere. But how are we going to sit here and say that we need to include everyone and be inclusive and have diversity, but then not use a term that is diverse and includes everyone? So I really believe in using it, but I also want to make people comfortable. So I really try to use everything. And for those of you who don't speak Spanish, just really quickly, if you say, a bunch of Latinos had this great, discovered something, that could be all men, or it could be all women and one man. So it, does discount women at an extent, the way that we're able to view society now. However, that is part of the language. So, we just kind of have to decide for ourselves. And I think, just be kind to everyone.
So I'm going to push you a little bit, because I think there's folks sometimes that are looking for a little bit of guidance, right? So they might say, well, I don't have a deep knowledge and I don't know how to use the term. So is it okay if I just say, and this is not me saying this, I'm speaking on behalf of folks who may have similar questions, but if they were to say something like, if I were to say, describe people that look brown as Mexican, is that offensive? If that's what my parents taught me, is that an offensive thing to say? Is there something that I can say that's not going to get me in trouble? I'm asking that for the purpose of the question, not literally, but I would love for you to give an answer to that.
Yvonne, go ahead. I saw you were ready.
Well, I mean, in my case, right, I'm born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I embrace, of course, my Latin and Hispanic culture all around. But in terms of, if you want to say something where you can't go wrong, I would say Latino or Latina is equally as interchangeable. Just because all Spanish-speaking countries, well, except Spain, people in Spain are Hispanic, but they're not Latino. That would be more of an all-encompassing, I guess, word or classification.
I've actually seen people put Latino/X, which I think, as we are looking at, different pronouns and all of these things, I think that also makes people feel inclusive in the LGBTQ plus area. So like I said, I try to use all of them, but I do want to address something that you said that has happened to me many times. I have had people be like, "Oh, you're Hispanic? Do you speak Mexican?" Or, "Oh, you don't look Mexican." Like, I mean, really, it's difficult, and I think that is one of the things that I really love about these kinds of conversations and about Hispanic Heritage Month in general, is it really shines a light and allows us to educate people. I have so many conversations where people ask me, are there really Latinos? Are there really Hispanics in Pittsburgh? I don't see them. I don't hear them. And I'm like, well, what would make you think that I was Latino? No estoy hablando así, right? Like, I'm not standing here talking Spanish or speaking with an accent. Like, I'm not super tan this year. Maybe beach next year, we'll see. But I mean, it's just nice to be able to have these conversations and let people know that you could be Black, white, Asian, brown, like it doesn't matter, and you could still be Latino. So thank you for having us here to educate people and really let them know that we're here.
Yeah, and so I also want to clarify and say that one of the correct things is not assuming that anyone who identifies as Hispanic is Mexican. I think that when you come from call them maybe older towns like a Pittsburgh or Cleveland, That may have been something that has been passed down, and I just want to correct that that is not an accurate term to identify all Hispanic people as Mexican. And we celebrate, to your earlier point, like Latin America, Latin cultures, that's where Latino comes from, and Hispanic is Spanish speaking. So that's really in a different space. I want to dive into some of the numbers a little bit more around, we talked about Hispanic Americans are the largest minority group in the United States right now. Yvonne, data from the 2013 census stated that 1 in 6 households are underbanked or unbanked. And I'm sorry, 1 in 6 are unbanked and 1 in 3 are underbanked. What does that statement mean to you? And why do you think that is? And I'm asking you that question first. I'd love to get both of your opinions, but Yvonne specifically does work in the community around business development, some of the things that he's been doing. And so when you hear this data around 1 in 6 households being unbanked and 1 in 3 being underbanked, what does that statement mean to you, and why do you think that is?
No, it's an excellent question. It's something that we run into a lot, and often. First and foremost, that means that organizations and banks like Dollar and organizations like us at the Chamber, that means we have a lot of work to do. It's a matter of walking the line and reaching out to grassroots organizations that really have the pulse of the community so that people can gain that trust. It's from what I run into, it's a trust and confidence issue. I mean, people, especially if they are newer to the community, newer to the United States, they may not be used to banking in their home country. They may not be used to the same resources that we have here. So it's a trust and confidence issue where organizations like Dollar, like us at the Chamber, we need to bridge that gap to make sure that people have that trust and participate in banking.
Melanie, did you want
and
to
I want to bring it to the sorry, I want to bring it to the community side also. That's the technical and the finance side, but what does that mean for our communities, right? So you're looking at individuals who do not have the security of even having the funds to want to, or having the education to be banked, and what that says about education. So I don't know if you know, but Latinos were the most likely to open businesses. We open businesses at a rate of 8 to 1. We're the least likely to reach the $1 million mark. We're the least likely to get higher education, and we're talking of any group. So while we're opening businesses the most, we are not moving up financially and in education. And I think that is something that this comes back to, is that we're really lacking that value in financial stability. Now, Latinos, it's wonderful that we value community and family, but that sustainability, people come here for a lot of people come here for a better life and more opportunity, but they still have the survival mindset instead of the growth mindset. And I think that we, for so long, have been an underserved community, and we have not had the targeted resources, because trust is really difficult with the Hispanic community, especially first and even some second generation, as we saw with the previous administration. People racially profiled walking down the street could be stopped. We had all these raids, and so it breaks down the trust. So while there are these programs with the SBA and other things teaching financial literacy, etc., our community has really been missed. And I think it all comes back to that. And then when you do not have that stability, you can't participate or contribute in the community in the same ways that you would if you had those things behind you. So that's kind of my view on it.
Melanie, you actually bring up an interesting point, right? Like this idea of, and we talked about this a little bit during Black History Month, where there's this belief of, this is America, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and there's this sort of mindset that once you're here, you're good to go because you got all the resources. And what I'm hearing you say is that the resources might be here, but there might be a gap in education in how to get to those resources. There might be things that we might take for granted, might not be as simple to someone who is first generation, or even has been in this country for many generations, but their family has lived at a certain economic status. I mean, you talked about the idea of having like a growth mindset versus working from a space of scarcity, right? Like What are some of the other barriers to building wealth or home ownership or creating small businesses as we think about the Hispanic community from two sides of it, right? The internal, like in the community, and then things that we could be doing.
So I think it's really trust, education, and engagement on a corporate level. Um, this is something that you and I and Yvonne and I have spoken about at length is the kind of there's 30 people on here, so someone's going to quote me later, but it's this checking the box mentality, right? So many times companies want to do things like this and then never talk to us again. They want to join the chamber and then completely bail. Now, you guys are not like that. Andrea Vasquez has been very involved in the chamber. You are looking to take the next steps. We've already had amazing conversations. I know we have things in the future, but unfortunately, so many companies who want to say that they support the community really just want to do a press release and move on. And when you have that barrier in resources, as well as that barrier with trust, it takes more time to build up. It takes actual programs, not just one-time events. It takes real education and an investment in time and a financial investment, which we know that companies have the ability to do because they're supporting so many other communities. So I think it's in that education in the numbers in the Hispanic community, the importance, and the potential in economic growth that the Hispanic community has to help every other community grow as well. I think that those are where I would say that the gaps are that really need filling. Yvonne, what do you think?
Well, the easy answer would be, that I think always comes up is, of course, language. Having resources available not only in Spanish but in multiple languages, right? Specifically when it comes to banking, when it comes to, financial things that are going to be a little bit more complicated. I run into that daily where, some of my clients, right, Spanish is their first language, they speak English, but they're more comfortable speaking to me because I can break things down in a way that they understand. And I just wanted to mention one of our sister organizations, the Pittsburgh Hispanic Development Corporation. They're located in Beachview. They're essentially our incubator. So any new entrepreneurs that want to start businesses, they are going to them, and that's the way that we're kicking off and starting businesses in the community here in Pittsburgh. I just wanted to say hats off to them and what they're doing, and we will continue to collaborate on a day-to-day, helping our entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and you mentioned that group, and we're actually bringing them in separately to help train some of our leaders in the bank around engagement with the Hispanic community locally. So, and we're looking to share that training across our region, our network as well. You began talking a bit about the idea of practically supporting the Hispanic community. But what does it look like for an organization to authentically build a relationship with the Hispanic community, right? Like, go back to what are the first few steps? And I love that you had mentioned in your last answer, this is something that's going to take time. You essentially said, time, talent, treasure. This an organization needs to invest in that. But what does that practically mean to invest time in building a relationship? This is a question for both of you.
So this is one of my favorite questions because it is harder to do the work than it is to check a box, but it does start with that checking the box. It starts with just picking up the phone, calling and saying, we want to be involved. So that's number one. That's a great start. From there, it's not only external in working with organizations like ours, the Latino Community Center, the Hispanic Development Corporation, Casa San Jose, and developing or getting involved in either existing programming or creating new programming or sponsoring programming that's already out there, maybe volunteering with one of those organizations, joining a board. But the light also reflects internally, and that is so important. It's not just about making sure that you've got so many Hispanics on your staff, so many, women on your staff, so many XYZ. Like it's not about that. It's about, of course, looking at that and making sure in leadership that your leadership is representative of the people that you serve. but also in creating an internal culture that cultivates equity. So when I say that, I mean things like today, recognizing and educating employees on these different areas. Because let's be honest, none of us know everything about every other culture. Most of us don't even know everything about our own cultures and where we come from, right? So creating an environment that allows people to not all want to be the same, but to recognize differences as strengths, to be able to share openly, to celebrate each other's not only cultures, but just the things um, that make everyone unique. And that's what a lot of people don't realize about diversity and inclusion. They think it's sex, religion, race, gender, or I said gender, but you know what I mean? Like, and it's just simply not that. Diversity can be different ways of thinking, and it's always in that the first step of just realizing that you need to make change and choosing to do that is the second step, and third is actually following through and following through until you see change, until you're able to make change or be a part of change. So I do think that it's a process, and luckily here we are in Hispanic Heritage Month, and we're starting the process. I hope that not only do we have conversations, but I hope that everyone on here, whether you get involved in a bigger way or whether it just means looking up some Hispanic Heritage Month events and being a part of that, which, sorry Yvonne, I'm going to let you go, I promise, but I just want to invite everybody. We have an event tonight from 5:30 to 7:30 at Highmark Stadium. It's our Hispanic Heritage opening. They'll have food and drinks that will be there, but we're going to have a local musician playing, and we're just trying to be together, celebrate, do a little casual networking. And if anyone would like to go, we do have a thing up for Dollar Bank employees where you can go to Dollar Bank employee and put in the code dollar. So I'm sure that that link will be sent out, but I would love to invite all of you to attend, bring a guest, bring a friend, and let's have a good time and celebrate Hispanic heritage.
You said this is what day is that? Oh,
Today,
today. What time?
that is 5:30 to 7:30.
Okay, I'll try to make it after work. I don't get off till 6 o'clock, and it's over Heinz Field.
It is at what's it called? Highmark Stadium. The Riverhounds are hosting. So that's
Oh, on
actually
the other side of the
right
river.
across from Station
Okay.
Square.
Yes, yes. Okay. And one last question: is there parking there?
So there is parking. And you know what, guys? If you just end up showing up and you haven't registered, just tell the people at the door that you're with Dollar Bank and they'll take your name and email and you can just go right in.
Okay. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I sent an email saying that tomorrow's Mexico Independence, not the Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah. Well, we're
Very
gonna
see, look,
jump
we're
back.
getting educated already.
We appreciate the questions. We're going to open it up in a little bit for a few more questions. One of the guests who has to leave actually in a bit asked a question and says, what advice do you have for employee resource groups to support Hispanic Heritage Month without participating in cultural appropriation?
Yvonne?
Well, I would say that just to, pretty much, it's a great question. Um, I'd say to make sure that the event includes everybody. I would say whatever events that you are having. If it needs to be a particular theme, make sure that it's kind of all encompassing, not focusing on one particular sector of the Latino community. But I would say that.
I would say partner, partner, partner. There are, instead of Chipotle or making tacos internally, go to the community, go to a community restaurant, go to a community food truck, give back to the community, call someone from one of the local Hispanic nonprofits, and have them come speak and do a little bit of education. There are so many authentic opportunities. And I love that you asked that because people right away are like, let's grab tacos and have lunch. Like, hey, you know what? That's great. I love tacos, but help the community, bring in authenticity. And at the end of the day, I know that for a lot of people, cultural appropriation is a hot button. For me, I'm glad that we're opening the door, right? Because then even if someone brings up cultural appropriation, then you say, hey, how can I fix it? What can we do next time? So that would be my thing, like just partner, partner, partner. If this is not your culture, ask someone whose culture it is. I guarantee you that there is someone in every office who has Hispanic relatives, is Hispanic. If your great grandmother was Hispanic, you're Hispanic, or just call us. Well,
Yeah, authenticity is definitely key, Melanie. I agree 100%.
You're listening to Inclusive Voices, sponsored by Dollar Bank. Today we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and I'm joined by Melanie Marie Boyer, Executive Director of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Ivan Ucero, Vice President of Selects Practices at USI Insurance Services. I want to remind our guests that in a few minutes we will open up the conversation for questions. You can send those to me privately in the chat or post them publicly, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question if you'd like to do that as well. Additionally, the event that Melanie was talking about, I will be there this evening. So if you want to, the access code and the link, please shoot me a message after this, and I will get that information to you so you can sign up. So, Yvonne and Melanie, what is one thing you wish people understood about the Hispanic community?
I would say for me, the word ambiguity comes to mind, which sounds kind of funny. But I brought it up before, we Latinos don't look a certain way. We don't speak a certain language. We don't come from a specific country or even region. Here in Pittsburgh, we don't really have one central location that is a Hispanic area. Now that's developing in Beachview, but we are so much more diverse within our own group than people realize. And I think that is one of the biggest barriers in education we face. So I'm really trying to drive that home this month. Like, I'm Latina, soy Colombiana, like I'm a Colombian citizen. Ivan is from Puerto Rico. I mean, any of us, look in the mirror. You could be Hispanic. Just think about that. That's what I wish I wish everyone knew that.
Yeah, and to add to that, Melanie, despite us being connected in the community by a common language and maybe, common cultural tendencies, we are our own melting pot. I mean, I look at back home. I mean, there are, black, white Puerto Ricans, Asian Puerto Ricans, and it is the same for the rest of the Hispanic community. I just, we're not all just checking one box. We are our own melting pot.
So, what's a hope that you have for the Hispanic community, locally and nationally? I'll start with you, Yvonne, because I think Melanie just took a drink of water.
Well, we are at the point now where, it's my goal and wish to see people starting to participate and involve themselves in local school boards, government. It starts with organization and then it moves on to mobilization. We can't really expect our voices to be heard and us wanting to see more people in terms of leadership positions without doing so. I mean, it applies in Western Pennsylvania specifically, where it's really time for us to get involved, and nationally as well. I mean, we don't just want a seat at the table; we want a voice at the table.
Ooh, that was I love that. And I mean, when I think about it, there are so many things that I could say here, economically, with different programs, like Yvonne said. But I think that where that starts, which I'm not a person to start small, I'm like, what's the long term? What's the big thing? But because we are so diverse, because we are so spread out, for me, a shorter goal is just to be united, to really be a community that supports and uplifts one another so that we have the numbers and we are seen as a group. We work as a group together so that we can have that representation that Yvonne is talking about. I want to point out that, when you have charity events, networking events, you have to send out invitations to politicians. They get free tickets. They ask you to speak, all these things, which, that's what they do. That's fine. But for our last few events, so the one at Fogo de Chao, we had 8 politicians come. I invited 0 of them, 0. 8 of them paid for tickets. 0 of them asked to speak. And that is because we have been working together to be a united voice, to show our strength in numbers, show that we're here, we matter, we count, we're making a difference. And even if you don't give us a voice, we are taking it. So you're either going to support us or not. And in that case, it's not going to be reciprocal. So that is my goal. We're definitely getting there, but there's a lot more work to be done.
Melanie, I want to add on something that you were just talking about with the idea that we're here. We have presence here in the United States of America. Speaking about the Hispanic community, the census data just said the Hispanic community is the largest minority population and accounts for $1.7 trillion, trillion with a T, in buying power annually. This tells me that even though earlier we had a conversation around a portion of the population being underbanked and unbanked, I'm also hearing that there's strength in this community. Why should that number, $1.7 trillion, get the attention of organizations? $1.7 trillion in buying power.
You know what? It's not even that number. It's the fact that that number is growing exponentially, whereas other groups are growing in very small increments. You know what? That sounds like a huge number, but because I know what the projections are, that number doesn't even mean anything to me, because I know that in 5-10 years, it's going to be way more. That is the 8th largest economy in the world by itself. Hispanics in the United States are the 8th largest economy in the world. Think about that. And then we are growing at much faster rates than any other group. By, I think it's 2050, we'll only be 13% less than Caucasians in this country. So if you're not working with the Hispanic community, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're a company. I don't care if you're a cashier. I don't care if you're a citizen in the street. If you are not aware of Hispanic culture and you're not working with Hispanics, you are never, ever going to reach your full potential. And that's a fact.
A lot of research that supports that as well. We're going to open it up for questions. If you have a question for our panelists, please put that in the chat. We'd be happy to get that. You could shoot that to me privately, or you could put it in the chat publicly. I do want to ask, if an organization came to you and said, all right, what are the first 3 things that you would recommend that I should do to engage with the Hispanic community in my area, in Cleveland or Virginia or Pittsburgh or wherever they're at? What's, if you had to give a short list and say, all right, here's a short list, now go. What would you say those things would be? And this is for both of you. You've given a bunch of really great feedback today, and I want to see if you could narrow that down to a bullet point of 1, 2, or 3 things.
So I would say connect, invest, and elevate. So connect with the organizations that are already working in the community, because you're not going to break down that trust barrier without them. Invest. Look at the places that are making the biggest difference in the community. Invest in what they're already doing, and then work next to see how you can improve that, because organizations need support. And if they can't survive now, especially post-pandemic, they're not going to make it to get more robust programming in the future. And whether that be financially or putting in time, and then elevate. We all have a voice, especially at a corporate level, to help elevate one another. It's a numbers game. How can you get this out to more people? And when you invest in the community invests in you. And not only that, but with the shortage of employees, I think it's more important than ever to most companies that you reach out to these niche communities. So those would be my 3 things: connect, invest, and elevate. Just like you would do in yourself, your community, do it in the Hispanic community. And it all comes back together. We're not looking to elevate the Hispanic community, but the community at large.
And I would add just a few other things to what Melanie said. I would say, offer a service. Specifically because we all like things that cost very little or cost nothing. So it costs nothing to really offer a service. And I would say follow through with that service as an organization and help the community and the people involved take ownership of that service and make it their own.
It's fantastic feedback and advice. So that, I'm hearing connect, invest, and elevate, and then offer service and follow through in that service. So those are 5 incredibly practical ways. Melanie, I want to end with one last question for you as the Executive Director of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Hispanic Heritage Month is a great way to begin the conversation around, amplifying or elevating, using the word that you just used, elevating voices of the Hispanic community. How do you recommend that we continue this after this month, personally and corporately? And are there ways that we can connect over the course of this month with you and your organization?
Absolutely. So I'm actually going to start with the second half. So there are so many ways to connect. There are a number of events, including tonight's event. The River Hounds are doing a game on October 10th, where funds actually go back to our scholarship fund. We're always announcing different events and initiatives on our Facebook page, which you can follow. Just look up Pittsburgh Hispanic Chamber and it'll come up. You'll see our faces a bunch of times. And there really, just watch the news, Google, be aware and a part of things that are outside of your norm. And I mean for the Hispanic community this month, but I actually mean for all the other communities as well throughout the year. And that brings me to the first part of your question is how can we continue this? I think the most simple answer is to just continue because so many places call and say, okay, we want to learn about Hispanic heritage now, but Hispanic heritage and especially the contributions that we're making economically are important all year around. Any conversation that you are having around economic empowerment or actually around anything, representation matters. Make sure you are including community members from the Hispanic community when making decisions, just like you would include any other group. I think that historically, Pittsburgh has really seen things as black and white and not even done a good job in that aspect, let alone bringing in other groups. So while there are so many bigger things that we can do together, as a starting point, don't have one conversation. Keep including, keep having conversations all year. And I guarantee you, anyone that you include from the community will be here for it because like Yvonne said, we are ready to be recognized, we are ready to have a voice, and we are ready to make a difference. We already have been, and it's only going to get greater.
Well, this has been fantastic. There are not any questions in the chat, although I've had several people communicate that they have loved the conversation and had to jump off. This is a busy time here for us, so we've got a lot of things going on. I'm sure it's very busy for you as well. I do want to pause and see if anyone has a question for our panelists before we wrap up.
I want to add that I think that EBRGs, I know we had a question about that, and I love the cookie table reference, by the way. But I really think that if you are part of an EBRG, something that I really want to do and think that we need is a list of all of these Hispanic EBRGs, and we need to do something together. I don't really, I get the point internally, but if we have all of these groups, we can answer these questions together. Like the question earlier about how can we do something for Hispanic Heritage Month without cultural appropriation? Why should every company have to figure that out individually? We can come together, especially, under the umbrella of the chamber and all work together so that we're not doing the same little things to make small progress, but working together to take leaps forward instead of tippy toes.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Well, that's our time for today. I hope you learned something new. I know that I did. I have a list of very actionable items here that we can use to support the community at large here, but also make better inroads and more deeply connect with the Hispanic community. If there are topics that you would like to have discussed during our Inclusive Voices series, please email D&I@dollarbank.com. Next month, our Lunch and Learn will guide us around ways to better serve and support people with disabilities in the workplace as we celebrate Disability Awareness Month. Finally, if you've enjoyed this, please post one thing that you've learned on social media. Be sure to tag Dollar Bank. We'll try to forward that along. Thank you again to our wonderful panel. You all were fantastic and inspiring. Until next time, remember, every community, every person has value. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.